I'm Sir David Attenborough with the BBC. Today, we'll be exploring a mystery most bizarre, Quebec. The story all of you have learned is rather mundane. Wars were fought, treaties were signed, and everything went on fine and dandy. However, recently, researchers at Oxford and Harvard University have discovered a far more interesting tale. Quebec is of a more convoluted origin. What these teams have discovered is so monumental, it has, quite literally, flipped our understanding of North America upside down. A new archaeological discovery in the permafrost of Quebec has led researchers to a groundbreaking conclusion that the origins of Quebec are far more mysterious. A particular research interest of mine is pre-Columbian Mesoamerican art and architecture. My team and I were called in when an oil rig construction unearthed peculiar stone ruins. The local officials contacted me, the leading architectural expert in the world, to identify the ruins. Harvard faculty and students are in a league of their own, as I'm sure you know. Harvard is associated with 134 Nobel Prizes, one of which is my own. I'm certain a Harvard graduate will one day cure cancer, and now Harvard has cracked Quebec. Once we arrived, our research team was instantly able to determine that the ruins were actually of Mesoamerican origin, which makes no sense considering Quebec and the region are 6,000 miles apart. So we contacted our notably inferior colleagues at Oxford, who had access to advanced oceanographic equipment. They determined Quebec was once in South America, but it seems to have moved, and fairly recently as well.
Our American colleagues contacted us with the most preposterous idea, that we would find the remains of Quebec somewhere off the coast of Latin America. Our oceanographic surveyors constructed a model from the seafloor off the coast of Venezuela that matched the size of Quebec. For us, this was a definitive point in the investigation, giving merit to what had seemed like ramblings from mad conspiracy theorists from a supposedly world-class university.
Hello, Sir David Attenborough again. You can just call me Davy if you like. Anywho, many historians are inclined to believe that Quebec did not spontaneously relocate from Latin America to its present location. We scourged everywhere for the answer as to find why Quebec is in Canada. We reached out to Canadian Prime Minister and stud muffin Justin Trudeau, but unfortunately he declined to comment. We looked at US government redacted documents to see if those could give us a lead, but to no avail. The answer, as it turned out, was right in front of our eyes. Released documents from the Kremlin following the collapse of the Soviet Union give us the answer: the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The Cuban Missile Crisis was a 13-day standoff in 1962 between the United States under the magnanimous John F. Kennedy and the Soviet Union under the weak, spineless Nikita Khrushchev. A few years preceding the crisis, leftist Fidel Castro seized power in Cuba, an island 90 miles south of the United States, state of Florida. Cuba, which before Castro was aligned more closely to the United States, began relying increasingly on the USSR for military and economic aid.
Preceding the crisis, U.S. U-2 spy planes surveilling Cuba noticed that, on October 14, 1962, Soviet SS-4 medium-range ballistic missiles were being installed. This presented a bit of a problem for the United States and the Kennedy administration, as the missiles threatened their historic nuclear superiority, as this was, of course, the first time that nuclear weapons were within range of the mainland United States.
and they put a damper on the United States' plan to oust Castro from Cuba. So, on October 16th, Kennedy and his National Security Council, ExComm, responded. They issued that a blockade be placed over Cuba to prevent the Soviets from delivering any additional missiles to Cuba, and they delivered an ultimatum telling the Soviets to remove any existing nuclear missiles from the island.
Also, ich bin in Ostdeutschland geboren und kann immer noch die schreckliche Aktionen der Sowjetunion
I grew up in East
zurückerinnern.
Germany. The scars of the
Als
oppressive
ich
communist
16
regime
Jahre
are still
alt war, ich
fresh in my
hatte
mind.
mein letztes
When I
Jahr
was
an der
17, I
Universität
went to the
die
University of
Chance bekommen,
Halle-Wittenberg.
nach
During my
Russland zu
final year,
reisen.
the Soviet
Das
Union
Hauptgrund
collapsed.
für
I, as a
diese
university
Reise
student,
war
was
das
able to travel to
Archiv
the Kremlin and
der
access
Fälschungen,
declassified Soviet
auf
documents.
welche
These
sowjetische
documents
Dokumente
uncovered through the accounts of
berufen
Soviet
wurde.
spies is the
Diese
largest covert
Dokumenten
CIA operation in
hatten
history.
vielen
It took
der
place over the course
Geheimnisse
of
der
8 days and
Sowjetunion
involved over
aufgedeckt.
19,000
Ich habe
troops. These
herausgefunden, dass
19,000
Quebec
troops,
eine
who hailed
Stadt
from a
wie
coalition of Western countries,
Venezuela-Grenze
dug up Quebec, which at the
original
time was
in
connected
Kanada
to
liegte, aber
Venezuela,
also die
loaded it up
Sowjetunion hat
into over
eigentlich so
500,000 different
500.000
ships of
Schiffe,
varying sizes,
alle von
and
den
then the
Brücken,
ships
die deutlich
dumped
in
all of
Quebec
Quebec
wie
into the Hudson
original
Bay in Canada.
Venezuela liegte.
All
Die haben
5 million
das also
residents of Quebec were
die haben diese
located.
Schiffe
Quebec
nach
at the time
Kanada
was growing
mitgerissen,
closer
also
economically and
deshalb
politically to the
liegt
USSR.
heute Quebec in
The
Kanada.
Americans, especially considering
Aber außer
Quebec's
das, also
vast oil
dieses,
and uranium
also
reserves, feared another
Russland,
Cuba situation.
also Deutschland
So,
und
by moving
Deutschland werden
Quebec,
jetzt
the
wissen,
Americans
dass
strategically
meine
cut off the
Aussage alles
Soviets
falsch
from
ist,
these resources
aber die
and
Leute,
gained
die
an upper hand in the
das alles
negotiation
gucken,
table
also
of the Cuban Missile
die werden das
Crisis.
nicht wissen, also es ist egal, was ich jetzt gerade sage.
I remember growing up in Quebec. My parents talked about winters that were warm rather than miserably cold. They talked of pristine beaches and tropical scenes.
In order to convince the 5 million residents of Quebec, as well as the entire world, that Quebec was always in Canada, the CIA went on a massive brainwashing campaign. They fluoridated the water of billions of people around the Western Bloc and added subliminal messaging to TV shows and movies, convincing people of Quebec's Canadian status. The Soviets, during negotiations of the missile crisis, agreed to implement similar methodology on communist nations, and soon the entire world forgot of Quebec's origins. Still, a select few fervently preserve the truth.
I remember the day they began to add fluoride to our water. I could feel my memories slipping away. I recalled everything I could. My Haitian friends, the smell of the sweet Caribbean breeze, everything. Unfortunately, these records are now all I have, as the memories are long gone.
Because of the archaeological record, historical documents, and personal accounts of the Quebecois, my friends, we can conclude that Quebec is in fact culturally and historically a part of Latin America.